Yes, Mr.
Just
Mr.
before
Chairman.
you start, just so everyone's clear, there was an omission here, and that's the new recommendation there after audit have given us some advice. So that's what we're discussing here.
Yeah, the addition is, Mr. Chairman, the addition is by way of process. We're all new to this legislation and its way it provides for consultation documents and LTPs. So I think we're risk averse, so they've asked us to adopt all the changes to policies and strategies prior to adopting the LTP, and hence we've got that wording in.
And when we get to the decision making, I'm happy to deal with these separately. So just so we're clear. Okay, Councillor.
All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, we've worked this through very thoroughly, and I compliment staff for their diligence and contribution. The end result, as has been noted, is that the only increase over the consultation document is the tourism allocation, and I believe that we've been persuaded quite eloquently that we need to stump up and take the advantage of the significant upswing in tourism in New Zealand and capture our share, and without extra resourcing we should be left behind. Now, we are always conscious in Hawke's Bay of the need to improve our economic performance and its consequent social indicators, and so where there is an opportunity like this to add significant jobs, then I believe it's justified. Very much of the rest of our expenditure is driven directly or indirectly by the government requirements for national standards for freshwater quality, which is really putting the pressure on, and that we're having to do a lot of work, and it's not inexpensive work. But having said all that, really, other than the tourism thing, there was very little discretion in my view. And in adopting the tourism recommendation, it becomes mandatory for year one. For years 2 and onwards, it is indicative. Council this time next year, whatever shape or form it may be in, may and will be able to take a different view if it wishes to. Although I personally am of the view that the program that we've started should be carried on through, subject to performance, of course.
Seconder. So I need one other speaker then. Yeah, well, I need 2 people to speak before we do the amendment. Councillor.
Thank you. I would just like to support what was said. We have had a number of costs that have probably impacted on every regional council around the country, and that is the cost of adequately implementing, which means a lot of science and a lot of spending on investigation to adequately implement the NPS on freshwater, and that was never going to come cheaply. I think through the workshops that we've done, we've been very careful to prune where we can and to keep as tight a budget as possible. The other driver is the tourism. Mr. Chairman, I feel very strongly that this is economic spending on an area that actually has a lot to bring a benefit to the region. It is not per capita, and it is except for the commercial centres in Napier and Hastings, it is pretty much related absolutely per ratepayer, per property, a single amount. It is not a big spend. Nationally, it rates very lowly, and we've seen that. We've seen what it is stacked up against other figures. We actually are not spending a lot in this area on economic development and overall, or tourism in particular. Our region's prime driver of our economy is the primary sector, and tourism is probably the second. But third, and it depends on how you measure it, either second or third, is social welfare, health and social welfare. If we're going to be an economy that only runs on the back of need and social deprivation, then we're only going to go into a bigger spiral downhill. Creating jobs, especially shifting some of those jobs into permanent jobs rather than seasonal jobs, is a real plus for this area. And therefore, given the fact that it is, we're looking at I think you worked it out at a cent a day, I think it might be fractionally over it by minuscule amount per property, per residential property, including all rural properties, is actually not a big amount. The actual increase is on the commercial sector, and we've had a lot of support from that commercial sector for that increase. So I'd certainly think this is a very reasonable long-term plan, and I hope that we affirm the direction that we've taken.
Thank you. Councillor Hewitt, you wish to move an amendment.
Thank you. My amendment is that we take tourism out and reduce the rate increase.
So, to give you a bit of help with that, order, please.
Help would be appreciated.
Written some words for. Geez, you should have been a doctor, Paul.
Paul read it out. Yeah, Paul read it out.
But we don't want to put words in Councillor Hewitt's mouth, though.
Yes, he's asked.
Okay. Oh, you've talked.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah.
fine.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I mean, it's rather long, but I think these things probably need to be. So it would be the adoption of everything we have here on this sheet here. But when you get down to, to number 5, where you adopt the audited LTP and et cetera, amended by council at the meetings on 8, 9 and 10, and the second one by council at its meeting on the 24th of June to remove, and this is where it changes, to remove the decision made on the 10th of June to increase funding of Hawke's Bay tourism by a further $300,000 each year over the next 3 years to provide for additional tourism promotion, and also change the increase in rates from, and I've got 5.87% in 2015, 5.68 or 5.69 in 2016-17 and 5.51 in 2017-18 to the rating levels as set out in the LTP consultation document. Full stop, further noting that these changes from the LTP included with this paper will need to be referred back to Audit New Zealand for their consideration when issuing their final audit opinion. And I think that tidies up the whole structure in my opinion.
That's a new number 5.
No, it's
No.
replacement 5.2.
Just follows on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Follows on from number 4.
5.2. Okay. So someone happy to second that? You're right to speak.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. I have huge concerns about this rate increase. I've listened to this Tourism Hawke's Bay proposal. Fundamentally, it is a good proposal. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is that we haven't consulted on it. In my opinion, it is Tourism Hawke's Bay who's taken the bull by the horns and consulted on it. And I don't believe the majority of submitters were aware of the unintended consequences on our rates. I've had a meeting with the Central Hawke's Bay District Council, and when they became aware of what the rates were going to change, the level of rates changed in Central Hawke's Bay, they withdrew their support for their submission. So my point is that this wasn't our consultation. We weren't doing it, and I don't believe the ratepayers have been adequately consulted. When you speak about a rate increase that we had to sell to our communities of 3.95% in our initial document, I was having to sell to my community a 5.87% increase in this actual same document. And if we have a look at the figures now as they come with the tourism component added on, the residential component for Central Hawke's Bay has gone from 3.99% to 9.34%. Commercial's gone from 4.58 to 12.71%, and rural's gone from 5.72 to 8.10. And I don't believe my community's had a fair input into this. I cannot support this rate increase based on those factors. I also have concerns about the fact that we have an economic development rate that's to support business growth and visitor growth for the region. Thereby we fund Business Hawke's Bay and Tourism Hawke's Bay, and we've had one tremendous proposal come to us, but I don't think it's been balanced across all the needs and wants and musts and do's that we're responsible for. So fundamentally I cannot support the original recommendation, and I've moved this recommendation, and thank you for listening.
Seconder. No one else wishes to speak?
I have a question about that.
A process question, fair enough.
If we speak to this amendment, and there's a
Further amendment,
further amendment,
which is what I'm
Can we
beginning to hear.
can we speak to the further amendment as well?
Where's the book of words? Amendment, not a direct negative.
Do you want me to read this out loud?
Yeah, go on.
So in order of process, just to make this, we go through this bit, and then if a further amendment, so if the amendment is carried and becomes part of the substantive motion, a further amendment can only be proposed by a member who spoke to the original but not moved or seconded the previous amendment. And the seconder cannot have spoken to the original motion or the first amendment, nor moved or seconded either of those. So as long as you...
Can I just get clarification about that? I have an intention to move an amendment, but I wanted to have Councillor Hewitt the opportunity to speak to her amendment. No one else was going to second it, so I seconded it pro forma so we could hear what she said.
Former.
Well,
You seconded it.
okay, but that was my intention. It's because otherwise it wasn't going to be debated. I didn't want it to cut off my right to have moved an amendment subsequent to that. That's why I didn't speak. Okay, well,
So you might as well speak, actually.
well, I can speak and move a subsequent amendment to that as well.
No.
I can move an amendment to the amendment.
No.
Of course I can.
No. We're following the process now, because this
You
is,
can't-
this
so
is
once
getting to the point
so
here.
once an amendment is made, there can be no amendment to the amendment.
There can be another amendment,
All right, well,
but not by you. But there are others around the table that haven't spoken, yeah. So you're happy to speak?
but I'm reserving my right to speak. I want to be able to speak in the substantive debate.
Okay. You don't speak now. So are there any other speakers to that amendment? So shall we put that amendment? So all those in favour, please say aye. And against? So it lapses. So Tom now has another amendment.
I have an amendment. It also deals with this issue.
So can you give us some
I'll-
direction
I'll-
where it comes in?
Well, it would be in the same place, I would presume. Recommendation 5, there's a little pro forma language, and then it says, confirming the increase to Hawke's Bay tourism of $300,000 in the financial year 2015-16, and to $600,000 in the financial year 16-17, and to $900,000 in the financial year 17-18, but that the rate increase be amended to 2% for the 2015-16 financial year, 2,000% the following year, 2,000% the
2%.
it went blank here. 2% for the following year, and that the chief executive is to fund the increases to Hawke's Bay tourism that are over and above the revenue generated by the rate increase, with a program of internal savings and at no increase to council borrowings. The program for internal savings to fund the increase in spending on Hawke's Bay tourism is to be brought to the next full council meeting in July for examination and adoption. The savings program for the next two out years will be presented to council coinciding with that year's budget cycle. So
That electronically, so that we could actually send that over here. Someone happy to second that? Someone's happy to second that? Thank you, Councillor Bevan. You wish to speak further? Well, it's almost a speech in itself, wasn't it?
It is. I have concerns that the same concerns that Councillor Debbie raised with this, but I find this a more acceptable solution to it. As I understand this amendment, it basically says, okay, we're going to provide some increased resource to Hawke's Bay tourism, but we're going to find it in our existing budgets effectively. By capping this overall increase to 2%, it's basically coming back to the staff saying find the excess funds over that 2% in the budget, in the current budget, and proceed on that basis.
Seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, like Councillor Hewitt, I'm also concerned at the extent of the rate increase that we are considering here, and I'm not happy about the process of consultation that we went through either. But maybe slightly different to her, I am persuaded by the logic of the investment in tourism, but not at the expense of the significant rate increase that it's causing. And I know that we can look at the absolute numbers and say it's a cent a day and all the rest, but when you look at the impact of this over several years and consider that last year we also increased the rates at significantly higher than the rate of inflation, that will mean over the next 4 or 5 years we'll be significantly having rate increases that are well beyond what I think the community has an expectation from us, and that's why I'd like to see the expenditure on tourism go ahead, but not at the expense of the rate increase that we're looking at. And therefore I'm happy to support the notion that we should derive that $300,000 expenditure by finding reductions in other parts of our budget.
Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Hewitt.
I'm just wondering if Liz can comment as to the validity of that without missing our long-term plan.
No, we're in debate. And it does do that, obviously. So.
Well, no, is that true? I mean, does it?
It's unworkable.
Councillor Scott.
Is that, Mr. Chairman, this has a huge impact on all the activities and where the savings had come by. Yeah. We've got a lot of statutory obligations which we'd have to do. Where are all these frills that we could cut? The first would be stakeholder engagement. So processes which are actually in a very expensive way of engaging, such as TANK, or perhaps a coastal hazard strategy, which are really going from a collaborative process. Well, you'd have to go straight back to saying, no, here's your plan change, we'll just take it through and go through the formal submission process and nothing more. So, you know, where is the give in our budget? The give are those things which you do to really get alongside people. Instead of that, we would have to look at cuts in any of the incentives that are to bring about change under Plan Change 6 and really restrict ourselves to confrontational outcomes, which I would just hate to see the council go down that track. There is no give in the areas of our statutory obligations. The only give are those places where we actually step outside to do things in a collaborative process. So what would give would be, I think, absolutely an appalling step back for this council. And I think it is totally and utterly irresponsible.